When a fierce winter storm descends on the Wyoming Territory of 1885, it sets in motion an extraordinary tale of survival, compassion, and unexpected love. Sarah Mitchell, newly widowed and traveling with her week-old infant, faces certain death when her carriage breaks down in the unforgiving wilderness. As hypothermia creeps in and her baby's cries grow weaker, rescue arrives in the form of Jackson Cole, a wealthy rancher who's no stranger to loss himself. What begins as a desperate rescue transforms into something neither expected. In the warmth of Jackson's ranch, as Sarah helps with the daily chores and Jackson tends to her child's needs, they discover that sometimes life's harshest storms can lead to the most beautiful beginnings. But with Sarah's past still haunting her, can she trust her heart to love again? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Mitchell pressed her infant daughter closer to her chest, wrapping the last warm blanket around the tiny bundle. The broken-down carriage offered little shelter from the howling Wyoming wind, and the temperature had plummeted as darkness approached. Her fingers, red and stiff from cold, fumbled with the pearl-handled compass, Thomas's last gift to her before his death. "Please, Lord," she whispered, her breath visible in the frigid air, "help us survive this night." Little Emma whimpered against her breast, the sound growing weaker with each passing hour. The sound pierced Sarah's heart more sharply than the bitter cold. Her thoughts drifted to just 8 days ago, when Thomas had slipped away during Emma's difficult birth. The doctor's grave face, the midwife's consoling words, and the sudden weight of widowhood crashed over her again. She had decided then to make the journey to her sister's home in Montana Territory, believing it her only option. Now, trapped in this merciless storm, that decision seemed foolish beyond measure. The carriage driver, Mr. Peters, had left 3 hours ago to seek help, trudging through knee-deep snow toward what he believed was the nearest ranch. Sarah hadn't wanted him to go. The storm was too fierce, the visibility too poor, but they'd had little choice. The horses, spooked by the wind and unable to pull through a deep drift, had broken free of their harness and disappeared into the whiteness. Sarah checked the compass again, though it offered little comfort now. The needle swung uselessly as her hands shook. She tucked it back into her coat pocket, next to Thomas's worn leather medical bag. The sight of it brought fresh tears to her eyes. Her husband had been so proud of his profession, so dedicated to helping others. Now she couldn't even help their own child survive this nightmare. Emma's cry grew more insistent, hungry, despite the cold. Sarah unbuttoned her coat and dress with trembling fingers, cradling her daughter close to share what warmth remained in her body. As Emma nursed, Sarah hummed a lullaby, trying to keep her voice steady despite her growing fear. The wind suddenly shifted, and through its mournful howl, Sarah heard something else, a sound that made her heart leap. Hoofbeats. Or was her mind playing tricks, manufacturing hope from desperation? She strained to listen, holding her breath. There, again, definitely hoofbeats, growing closer. Sarah clutched Emma tighter and pushed open the carriage door, fighting against the wind. Snow whipped into her face as she peered into the gathering darkness. A shape emerged from the storm, massive, dark, and ghost-like. As it drew nearer, Sarah made out a horse, steam rising from its flanks, and atop it, a rider bundled against the cold. The figure reined his mount to a stop beside the carriage, and a deep voice called out over the wind, "Ma'am, are you all right in there?" Relief flooded through Sarah's body, making her dizzy. "Please," she managed to call back, her voice cracking. "My baby, we need help." The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots crunching in the snow as he approached. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face partially hidden by a snow-crusted scarf. But his eyes, when they met hers, were kind and alert with concern. "Jackson Cole," he introduced himself, already shrugging out of his heavy coat. My ranch is about 2 miles east of here. We need to get you both out of this cold right now." He draped the coat around her shoulders, and Sarah nearly wept at its warmth. "Sarah Mitchell," she managed. "And this is Emma. Our driver, Mr. Peters, he went for help. I'll send my men to look for him once I get you two to safety," Jackson assured her, his gaze taking in their situation with practiced efficiency. "Can you ride?" Sarah nodded, though in truth she wasn't certain. The cold had settled deep in her bones, making every movement an effort. But what choice did they have? As if sensing her determination, Jackson's expression softened. "Don't worry, ma'am. I'll make sure you both get there safely. Trust me." Something in his voice, steady, certain, yet gentle, made Sarah believe him. As Jackson helped her from the carriage, supporting her weight when her legs threatened to buckle, she sent up another prayer, this one of gratitude. Whether by divine providence or mere chance, help had arrived just when hope seemed lost. The powerful horse moved steadily through the storm, its hooves finding purchase in the deep snow. Sarah sat side-saddle in front of Jackson, his arms forming a protective barrier around her as he held the reins. Emma was bundled securely between them, wrapped in both Sarah's blanket and Jackson's spare wool coat. Despite the biting cold, the baby had fallen into an exhausted sleep, lulled by the horse's rhythmic movement. "Stay with me, Mrs. Mitchell," Jackson's voice rumbled close to her ear. Sarah realized she had been drifting, her thoughts growing foggy. She forced her eyes open, focusing on the hand-carved wooden horsehead adorning his saddle horn. The craftsmanship was remarkable, each detail lovingly rendered, telling of long winter hours spent in solitary creation. "The horse," she murmured, her words slightly slurred. "Did you make it?" "I did." His reply was warm with surprise. "Keeps my hands busy during storms like this. Never expected anyone to notice it, though." "It's beautiful." Sarah's head felt heavy, wanting to rest against his chest. "You're an artist." "No, ma'am, just a man with too much time alone." There was a hint of self-deprecation in his tone. "Keep talking to me. Tell me about your destination." Sarah fought against the encroaching drowsiness. "My sister in Montana Territory. Didn't know where else to go after Thomas." She trailed off, emotion thick in her throat. "Your husband?" Jackson asked gently. He was a doctor, so dedicated to helping others. But when Emma came, the memory was still raw, bleeding. There were complications. He wouldn't leave my side, worked himself to exhaustion treating both of us. Then his heart just gave out. Jackson was quiet for a moment. Only the wind and the crunch of snow under hooves filling the silence. "I'm sorry," he finally said, and Sarah heard genuine understanding in those simple words. Loss has a way of reshaping our world entirely. "You speak from experience," Sarah observed, finding clarity in focusing on him rather than her own grief. "My wife, Catherine, 5 years ago, mountain fever." His words were sparse but heavy with meaning. "The ranch was her dream as much as mine. Some days I wonder why I still keep it running." "But you do," Sarah said softly. "But I do." The horse carefully picked its way down a slight incline. "Look there. See that light through the trees? That's home." Sarah squinted through. The swirling snow, a warm glow beckoned in the distance, growing stronger as they approached. Gradually, the shape of a substantial ranch house emerged from the storm's fury. A barn loomed nearby, and as they drew closer, Sarah could make out other outbuildings scattered across the property. Jackson guided his horse to the barn first. "We'll get you inside the house in a moment, but I need to care for Stone here. He's earned his rest tonight." He dismounted smoothly, then reached up to help Sarah down. Her legs buckled as soon as her feet touched the ground, but Jackson's strong arms caught her. Emma stirred but didn't wake. The barn's interior was remarkably warm after the cutting wind outside. Jackson efficiently unsaddled his horse while Sarah leaned against a stall post, cradling Emma. She watched as he rubbed down the animal with practiced care, speaking to it softly in thanks. "Ready for the house?" he asked, returning to her side. "It's not much, but it's warm and dry." Sarah tried to take a step and stumbled again. Without hesitation, Jackson scooped her up, cradling both her and Emma as if they weighed nothing. "No arguments," he said firmly. "You're half frozen." The short walk to the house was a blur. Sarah's last clear memory was of warmth washing over her as Jackson carried them through the door, and the sight of a fire blazing in a large stone hearth. Then exhaustion claimed her, and she surrendered to the knowledge that, at last, they were safe. Sarah awoke to the gentle crackling of a fire, and the rich aroma of something cooking. Her eyes fluttered open, taking in unfamiliar surroundings. She lay on a comfortable settee drawn close to a massive stone fireplace, wrapped in warm quilts. Emma was no longer in her arms, and for a moment, panic seized her heart. "Your little one's right here, Mrs. Mitchell." Jackson's calm voice came from nearby. "She's doing just fine." Sarah turned her head to find him seated in a well-worn leather armchair, expertly cradling Emma in one arm, while stirring something in a cast-iron pot hung over the fire with his free hand. The sight was so unexpected, this large, weathered rancher handling her infant with such gentle confidence that she could only stare. "I hope you don't mind," he continued, his eyes on the baby. "You were nearly unconscious when we arrived, and she was starting to fuss. Seemed best to let you rest while I tended to her needs. My sister left some of her baby things here after." Her last visit found clean linens and even a proper swaddling blanket. Sarah pushed herself to sitting, muscles protesting the movement. "You're very kind, Mr. Cole, and clearly experienced with children." A shadow crossed his face. "Catherine and we tried for years, never blessed with our own, but my sister's children visited often enough." He checked the pot again. "Soup's nearly ready. You need to eat. Get your strength back." The room was spacious but cozy, filled with solid, well-made furniture that spoke of comfort rather than ostentation. A large oak dining table dominated one end, while comfortable seating clustered around the fireplace created an intimate gathering space. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with well-worn volumes. Sarah noticed a woman's touch in some of the decorative touches. Hand-embroidered cushions, carefully arranged dried flowers, a delicate tea service on a side table. "Your wife had beautiful taste," Sarah said softly, recognizing these as Catherine's contributions to the home. Jackson's hands stilled for a moment. "She made everything she touched more beautiful." He gazed down at Emma. "Your little one has her father's eyes, I'd warrant." "Yes," Sarah smiled sadly. "The same deep blue. Thomas was so looking forward to being a father." She watched as Jackson expertly shifted Emma to his shoulder, patting her back with a gentle rhythm. "You're a natural with her. Babies are honest creatures," he replied. "They know when they're safe, when they're cared for." He rose carefully and brought Emma back to Sarah. "She's been changed and fed, found some goat's milk in the spring house. Not quite what she's used to, but it'll do for now." Sarah gathered Emma close, breathing in her clean, warm scent. "Thank you seems inadequate for all you've done for us." Jackson moved to the fire, lifting the pot from its hook with practiced ease. "No thanks needed, Mrs. Mitchell. Couldn't leave you out there in that storm. No decent man could." He ladled the soup into a bowl and brought it to her with a spoon and a chunk of fresh bread. "Eat. The storm's still raging, but you're safe here for as long as you need to be." The soup was simple but delicious, tender beef, root vegetables, and barley in a rich broth. Sarah hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first spoonful touched her lips. Jackson settled back in his chair, seemingly content to watch the fire while she ate. "My men will head out at first light to look for your driver," he said after a while. "The storm should break by dawn. We'll also see about retrieving your belongings from the carriage. Mr. Peters, do you think he—" Sarah couldn't finish the question. "He's a local man, knows these parts well. Good chance he found shelter." Jackson's tone was reassuring but honest. "We'll find him one way or another." Emma stirred in Sarah's arms, making small, contented sounds. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but its threat seemed distant now, unable to touch them in this warm sanctuary. Sarah found her eyes growing heavy again, despite her best efforts to stay alert. Rest, Jackson said, rising to take her empty bowl. You're both safe here. Morning will come soon enough. As Sarah drifted off once more, she was aware of Jackson draping another quilt over her and Emma, his movements careful and quiet. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt truly protected, truly at peace. Dawn broke clear and cold, the storm having spent its fury during the night. Sarah woke to find Emma already fed and changed, contentedly cradled in Jackson's arms as he sat at the kitchen table, making notes in a tattered leather journal. The morning light streaming through freshly cleared windows cast a golden glow across the scene. "Hope you don't mind," he said, looking up. "She was fussing, and you needed the sleep." Sarah stretched, feeling remarkably refreshed despite the previous day's ordeal. "You're spoiling me, Mr. Cole. I haven't slept this well since—" She trailed off, the weight of recent months settling back on her shoulders. "Jackson," he said quietly, "if we're sharing breakfast and baby duties, might as well use first names." He gestured to a pot of coffee on the stove. "Help yourself, Sarah." The simple intimacy of her name on his lips made her pause, but she covered it by busying herself with pouring coffee. The kitchen was well organized, everything in its place. A row of copper pots hung from a rack, and dried herbs bunched neatly. Along one wall filled the air with their subtle fragrance. "My men found Mr. Peters," Jackson continued, his tone carefully neutral. "He made it to the Watson place, about 3 miles north. He's fine, just worried about you and the little one." Sarah sank into a chair, relief washing over her. "Thank God. And our belongings, already retrieved from the carriage. They're in the front room whenever you're ready to go through them." He shifted Emma to one arm, pushing the journal towards Sarah. "I was just reviewing the spring planting schedule. The storms delayed us some, but the moisture will help once the ground thaws." Sarah glanced at the neat columns of figures and notes. "You run this whole operation yourself? Have good hands working for me." "But yes, final decisions are mine." A shadow crossed his face. "Catherine used to help with the books. She had a way with numbers that made everything balance perfectly." Sarah touched the journal's worn cover gently. "You must miss her terribly." "Every day," he met Sarah's eyes, "just as you miss Thomas." The simple acknowledgement of their shared grief created a moment of perfect understanding between them. Emma chose that moment to gurgle happily, breaking the intensity of the exchange. "She has good timing," Jackson smiled, running a gentle finger along the baby's cheek. "Knows when to lighten the mood." He stood carefully. "I need to check on the hands, see about clearing paths to the outer pastures. Will you be all right here?" Sarah nodded, accepting Emma into her arms. "More than all right. Though I wish there was some way I could help, repay your kindness." "No repayment needed." He paused at the door, shrugging into his heavy coat. "But if you're of a mind, Catherine's kitchen garden could use some attention come spring. She'd hate to see it gone wild." The invitation, for that's what it was, though carefully wrapped in practicality, hung in the air between them. Sarah found herself smiling. "I'd like that. I've always loved gardening." After Jackson left, Sarah explored the kitchen, Emma contentedly sleeping in a makeshift bassinet, fashioned from a drawer padded with soft blankets. She found fresh bread wrapped in a cloth, eggs still warm from the henhouse, and salt pork in the pantry. As she prepared a simple breakfast, she caught herself humming, something she hadn't done since Thomas's death. In her grief, she had forgotten that life could hold these small pleasures. Morning sun on a clean floor, the smell of coffee and bread, a baby's peaceful breathing. The journal on the table caught her eye again, and she sat down to look through it more carefully. Between the lines of figures and farming notes, she found sketches: a hawk in flight, a stand of aspens, a woman's laughing face that must be Catherine. Jackson's hand had captured them, with the same attention to detail she'd noticed in his carved horse, each stroke deliberate and caring. Sarah touched one of the drawings lightly, understanding something new about the quiet rancher who had saved their lives. Here was a man who saw beauty in the world even through his grief, who created lovely things in his solitude, who opened his home to strangers in need without hesitation. For the first time since leaving home, she felt the stirring of hope for the future, fragile as a spring seedling but just as determined to grow. As the days lengthened, Sarah found herself falling into the rhythm of ranch life. Jackson proved to be a patient teacher, starting with simple tasks and gradually introducing her to the complexities of running such a large operation. Each morning, she watched him review the old ranch ledger, his fingers tracing along columns of careful notations as he planned the day's work. "The key to ranching isn't just about the cattle," he explained one morning, Emma sleeping peacefully in her makeshift cradle nearby. "It's about reading the land, the weather, the seasons. Everything's connected out here." Sarah leaned over his shoulder, studying the neat rows of figures. These preparations for spring, they seem so extensive. "Have to be." Jackson turned a page, revealing detailed drawings of the property's irrigation system. "One mistake in planning can mean the difference between prosperity and ruin. Catherine taught me that. She grew up on a ranch, knew things I never even thought to consider when I first started." The mention of Catherine came easier now, their shared understanding of loss creating a space where memories could be honored without pain overwhelming them. Sarah found herself sharing stories of Thomas too, remembering the joy rather than just the grief. "Would you like to learn to ride?" Jackson asked one crisp morning after watching Sarah struggle with the distance to the chicken coop. "Proper riding, not just perching side saddle in an emergency." Sarah hesitated, glancing at Emma, who was bundled warmly and secured to her chest in a sling Jackson's sister had left behind. "Is it safe with the baby?" "We'll start slow with old Belle. She's gentle as a lamb and smart enough to adjust her gait for a newcomer." His eyes crinkled with amusement. "Besides, every ranchwoman needs to know how to handle a horse." The words ranchwoman sent an unexpected warmth through Sarah's chest. She found herself nodding. "I'd like that." The lesson began in the barn, with Jackson teaching her how to properly groom and saddle a horse. Old Belle stood patiently as Sarah learned to brush her coat and check her hooves, the mare's calm presence helping to settle her nerves. "She likes you," Jackson observed, watching Sarah run a brush along Belle's neck. "Horses know good hearts when they meet them." "Like babies," Sarah smiled, remembering his words from their first night. "Just so." He adjusted Emma's sling slightly. "She's secure, ready to try mounting." With Jackson's steady hands guiding her, Sarah found herself astride Belle, the world suddenly higher and somehow more magnificent. Emma stirred but remained peaceful, apparently soothed by the horse's gentle warmth. "Now," Jackson said, leading Belle in a slow circle around the paddock, "the key is to move with her, not against her. Feel her rhythm. She'll take care of you if you trust her." Trust, such a simple word for such a complex journey. Sarah had been learning to trust again, day by day, to trust in her own strength, in her ability to care for Emma, in the kindness of this quiet man who had opened his home and his heart to them. Later that afternoon, as Jackson showed her how to read weather signs in the clouds and wind, Sarah realized how much her world had expanded. In the city, life had been contained within neat blocks and social conventions. Here, the horizon stretched endlessly, and worth was measured in capability rather than circumstance. "Storm coming?" Jackson noted, studying the western sky. "Not like the last one, but enough to need preparation." He pulled out his ledger, making quick notes. "We should bring the closer herd in, check the repair on the north fence line." "I could help," Sarah offered. "With the herd, I mean. Belle and I are getting along well." Jackson looked at her for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "You're learning quick," he said finally, "but let's wait for the next one. This weather could turn mean, and I won't risk you or Emma." His protectiveness, rather than feeling stifling, wrapped around her like a warm blanket. It wasn't the suffocating concern of her relatives after Thomas's death, but something steadier, a shelter rather than a cage. As they walked back to the house, Sarah carrying Emma while Jackson pointed out which plants would soon break through the snow, she felt a sudden surge of gratitude. That terrible storm had brought them here, to this place where healing could happen quietly, naturally. like spring following winter. "Thank you," she said softly, "for teaching me all this." Jackson's smile was gentle. "Thank you for wanting to learn. It's been too long since this place had someone eager to know its ways." The words hung in the air between them, full of unspoken possibility. The discovery came while Sarah was helping Jackson organize his study. In a drawer filled with papers and old correspondence, she found a faded photograph, a woman with laughing eyes and an infectious smile, her hand resting on a young tree. The resemblance to the sketches in Jackson's journal was unmistakable. "Catherine, that was her first spring here," Jackson said quietly from behind her. Sarah hadn't heard him enter. "She planted that oak sapling, said our home needed something that would grow with us through the years." Sarah carefully set the photograph down. "The large oak by the kitchen window? The same?" Jackson picked up the image, his thumb ghosting over its surface. "She had a way of seeing the future in things, said that tree would shade our children's children someday." The pain in his voice made Sarah's heart ache. "She sounds remarkable." She was. He tucked the photograph back into the drawer. "Some days I wonder if I'm betraying her memory by—" He trailed off, but his eyes met Sarah's with an intensity that made her breath catch. Emma's cry from the other room broke the moment. Sarah turned toward the sound, but Jackson was already moving. "I'll tend to her. You finish here." Left alone, Sarah pressed a hand to her racing heart. The feelings growing between them were becoming harder to ignore, yet guilt shadowed every tender moment. Was she betraying Thomas's memory by finding comfort in Jackson's presence? By wanting more than just shelter and safety? She found herself in front of the window, staring at Catherine's oak. Its bare branches reached toward the winter sky, strong and enduring, despite the seasons of solitude it had witnessed. Like Jackson himself. When she joined him in the nursery, a spare room they'd gradually adapted for Emma's needs, the sight before her made her pause. Jackson sat in the rocking chair, holding Emma close as he battled a fever that had suddenly gripped her. His large and cradled her tiny head with infinite gentleness, while he studied her flushed face with concern. "Her temperature's rising," he said without looking up. "I've seen this in my sister's children. Nothing serious if we catch it early, but we'll need to watch her through the night." Sarah knelt beside them, touching Emma's hot forehead. "What do we need? Already sent one of the hands to town for medicine. Meanwhile," he stood smoothly, still holding Emma, "we'll try my mother's remedy. Warm bath, cool cloths, and constant attention." They worked together seamlessly through the evening, taking turns holding Emma in the shallow bath, applying cool compresses, and ensuring she stayed hydrated. As night fell, Jackson insisted Sarah rest while he took the first watch. "You've hardly slept this past week," he said firmly. "I'll wake you if anything changes." Sarah wanted to protest, but exhaustion won out. She curled up in the chair next to Emma's cradle, watching Jackson pace slowly with her daughter, his deep voice humming an old lullaby. Just before sleep claimed her, a thought surfaced with startling clarity. This felt like family. She woke to pale morning light and Jackson's hand on her shoulder. "Her fever broke an hour ago," he whispered. "She's sleeping naturally now." Sarah moved to the cradle, relief flooding through her at the sight of Emma's peaceful face, no longer flushed with fever. Without thinking, she turned and hugged Jackson tightly. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. His arms came around her slowly, carefully, as if she might shatter, or perhaps as if he might. They stood like that for a long moment, sharing comfort and something deeper neither dared name. Finally, Jackson stepped back, his expression conflicted. "I should check on the men, see what needs doing after the night's neglect." "Jackson!" Sarah caught his hand before he could retreat completely. "You're not betraying her, Catherine." His startled look confirmed she'd read him correctly. "Just as I'm not betraying Thomas by—" She couldn't finish, but her meaning was clear. "Aren't we?" His voice was rough with emotion. "They should be here. Catherine should be tending Emma's fever. Thomas should be watching his daughter grow." "Yes," Sarah agreed softly. "They should, but they're not, and we're still here, still living, still capable of love." she wanted to say, but the word felt too large too soon. Jackson's thumb brushed across her knuckles, the touch sending warmth up her arm. Still capable of many things, he finished for her. Then he was gone, leaving Sarah to wonder if they were both ready for what their hearts were trying to tell them. The broken wagon wheel leaning against the barn wall caught Sarah's eye as she hurried to help Jackson prepare for the approaching storm. The sight of it, a remnant of that fateful night when their paths first crossed, sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. "Everything secure in the house?" Jackson called from inside the barn, where he was doing final checks on the livestock. "Yes, windows shuttered, supplies laid in." Sarah adjusted Emma more securely in her sling. "Cook stoves stocked with wood. And I've filled every pot with fresh water." Jackson emerged, nodding approval. "You've learned well. This one won't be as bad as the last, but it's best to be ready." He paused, studying the darkening sky. "Though I admit, I'm grateful for that first storm, terrible as it was." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Before Sarah could respond, a gust of wind whipped around the barn, carrying the first stinging pellets of ice. Jackson immediately stepped closer, shielding them both. "Inside, quickly!" he urged, one hand warm against the small of her back. "Storm's moving faster than I expected." They had barely reached the house when the full force hit. Wind howled around the eaves as Jackson secured the door behind them. Emma, disturbed by the noise, began to fuss. "Sounds familiar, doesn't it?" Jackson said softly, helping Sarah remove her coat. His fingers brushed her shoulders, lingering a moment longer than necessary. "Though the circumstances are somewhat different now." Sarah met his eyes, remembering how he had carried her, half frozen, through a similar door just weeks ago. "Very different," she agreed. The evening passed in comfortable domesticity as the storm raged outside. They worked together to prepare dinner, moving around each other in the kitchen with practiced ease. Jackson had become expert at entertaining Emma while Sarah cooked, telling the baby stories about the ranch's early days. "The first winter was the hardest," he said, bouncing Emma gently while Sarah kneaded bread dough. "Catherine and I were barely more than children ourselves, with big dreams and little experience. That old cook stove was our only source of heat until we could afford proper fireplaces." Sarah noticed he spoke Catherine's name more freely now, the memories bringing smiles more often than pain. "Thomas and I were the same in our first year of marriage," she shared. "He was just starting his practice, taking any patient who needed him, whether they could pay or not. We ate a lot of beans that winter." Their laughter mingled naturally, filling the kitchen with warmth. Emma joined in with happy gurgles, reaching for Jackson's beard with tiny fingers. "She's getting stronger every day," he observed, letting her grab his finger instead. "Growing like a prairie flower after spring rain." A particularly strong gust rattled the windows, making them all jump. Emma's face crumpled in distress, but before she could cry, Jackson stood and began walking with her, humming that same lullaby Sarah had heard during her fever night. Watching them, Sarah felt an overwhelming surge of emotion. This man, who had first appeared to her like a ghost in a snowstorm, had become so essential to their lives. He cared for Emma as tenderly as any father, anticipated their needs before they arose, and offered his heart's healing alongside their physical shelter. The storm's fury increased as night deepened. They sat before the fire, Emma sleeping peacefully in her cradle nearby. Sarah worked on mending one of Jackson's shirts while he whittled, the shapeless piece of wood gradually revealing what looked like a tiny horse. "A companion piece," he explained, catching her curious glance. "For the one on my saddle. Thought Emma might like her own when she's older." The simple statement of a future, one that included them in his life for years to come, made Sarah's hands still. Jackson seemed to realize the weight of his words, his own movements pausing. "Sarah," he began, setting aside his carving, "I know you plan to continue to your sisters when spring comes, but—" A thunderous crack interrupted him, followed by the sound of splintering wood. They were on their feet instantly, years of ranch life having taught Jackson to recognize trouble, and Sarah to trust his instincts. "The old oak," he said grimly, already reaching for his coat. "Must have split in the wind. If it falls wrong, it could take out the barn roof." "I'm coming with you," Sarah said firmly, already moving to check that Emma was secure in her cradle. "Sarah, you taught me about ranch life, remember? We handle troubles together now." The first crocus pushed through the melting snow beside Catherine's garden, its purple petals bright against the winter-worn earth. Sarah knelt beside it, Emma securely strapped to her back, and touched one delicate bloom. After the night of the storm, when she and Jackson had worked together to secure the fallen oak and prevent damage to the barn, something had shifted between them. Their easy companionship had deepened into something more profound, though still unspoken. "First sign of spring," Jackson said, approaching from the barn. He crouched beside her, his sleeve brushing hers. "Catherine always said the crocus was braver than any other flower, daring winter to try and stop it from blooming." She was right. Sarah watched as he carefully cleared away some snow from around the plant. "Everything's waking up." Indeed, the ranch was stirring with new life. The morning air rang with birdsong, and tiny buds had appeared on the surviving branches of Catherine's oak. The tree, though damaged, had been saved by their joint efforts that stormy night. Jackson had insisted on keeping the fallen limb, already planning to craft it into something meaningful. "Been thinking," he said, still focused on the flower. "The garden will need a proper fence before planting season. Keep the rabbits out." He glanced at her. "If you're still interested in tending it." The question beneath the question hung in the air. Sarah felt Emma wiggle against her back, reaching toward Jackson as she always did now when he was near. "I'd like that," she said softly. "The fence, the garden, all of it." Jackson's hand found hers, work-roughened fingers intertwining with her own. "The hands have been asking if you and Emma will be staying on. They've grown mighty fond of having a baby on the ranch. Brings good luck, they say." "Just the hands asking." Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. "No," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Not just the hands." He pulled something from his pocket, a small cloth pouch. "Found this yesterday, when we were clearing the last of the storm damage." Sarah opened the pouch to find a perfect heart-shaped stone, smooth and white against her palm. "It's beautiful. Like to think it's a sign," Jackson said. "Nature herself telling us it's all right to—" He paused, searching for words. "To let love bloom again, like that crocus there, pushing up through what's past, reaching for something new." Emma chose that moment to let out a happy squeal, her small hands patting Jackson's shoulder as he leaned close. The sound of her joy, so pure and uncomplicated, seemed to break something loose in both of them. "I loved Thomas with all my heart," Sarah said. "Always will. But being here, with you—" She touched the stone again. "My heart's grown larger somehow, found room for new love alongside the old." "Catherine would understand," Jackson nodded. "She always said love was the one thing that multiplied when you shared it." He squeezed her hand. "The ranch needs a family, Sarah. Emma needs a father, and I need you both." She turned to face him fully, seeing in his eyes all the hope and fear and love she felt in her own heart. "Then ask me properly, Jackson Cole." A smile tugged at his lips. "Marry me, Sarah Mitchell. Stay here and make this ranch a home again. Let me be a father to Emma, and let me love you both for all the days we're given." "Yes," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "Yes to all of it." He kissed her then, gentle and sure, while Emma patted their faces and the crocus bloomed, purple against the snow. When they parted, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. "We'll plant a whole row of crocuses," he said, "along the new fence. Purple ones for Catherine, blue for Thomas. So they're part of what we're building here." Sarah touched his cheek, understanding completely. Their lost loves weren't ghosts to be feared or memories to be buried, but foundations upon which they could build something new and beautiful. The morning sun broke through the clouds, warming the earth where winter's grip was finally loosening. In that light, Sarah could see their future spreading out before them like the ranch itself, vast and full of possibility, rooted in love, both old and new. The letter arrived on a bright spring morning, carried by the same mail rider who had brought news of Sarah and Emma's disappearance to her family months ago. Sarah recognized her sister Margaret's handwriting immediately, and the wedding ring on her finger, Thomas's ring, suddenly felt heavy as she broke the seal. Jackson watched her face as she read, noting the way her shoulders tensed. He'd just finished showing Emma how the new lambs played in the meadow, and the baby was still making excited gestures with her tiny hands, oblivious to her mother's distress. "They want us to come to Montana," Sarah said finally, lowering the letter. "Margaret says it's past time they met their niece, and—" She hesitated. "They've heard rumors about my situation here. About us." Jackson settled Emma more comfortably in his arms. "Your family has a right to be concerned. They think I'm not thinking clearly. That grief has clouded my judgment." Sarah's voice caught. "Margaret writes that Thomas wouldn't want his child raised by a stranger. Do you think she's right?" Jackson's tone was gentle, but Sarah could hear the hurt beneath it. "No," she said firmly, reaching for his free hand. "You're not a stranger, not to me, and certainly not to Emma." As if to prove her point, their daughter grabbed a fistful of Jackson's shirt, snuggling closer to his chest. "Still," he said carefully, "perhaps they should meet me, judge for themselves what kind of man would raise their niece." Sarah stood abruptly, moving to the window. Outside, Catherine's garden was coming alive with early spring plantings, their careful work beginning to show results. "You don't understand. They've already judged. Margaret writes that there's a doctor in their town, a widower, with a good practice. She thinks—" Sarah couldn't finish. "That he'd be more suitable," Jackson finished for her. "A man of Thomas's profession, established in society. Jackson, they're not wrong to want the best for you and Emma." His voice was steady, reasonable, though his hold on Emma had tightened slightly. "A doctor could give you both a life, more like what you knew before, security, society, education." "Stop it!" Sarah turned to face him, eyes flashing. "I don't want what I had before. I want this life, this ranch, this family we're building. When I lost Thomas, I thought my heart would never heal. But you—" She touched his cheek, feeling the slight tremor in his jaw. "You didn't try to replace what I lost. You helped me find something new, something just as precious." Emma chose that moment to speak her first real word. "Papa." They both froze, staring at the baby who was still patting Jackson's chest contentedly. Tears filled Jackson's eyes. "Sarah, That's who you are to her," Sarah said softly. "Who you've been since that first night when you saved us both. The man who held her through fever, who tells her stories, who's teaching her about the ranch that will be her heritage." She picked up the letter again. "I'll write to Margaret. Tell her we'll visit when the summer work allows. They can meet. You then see what I see." Jackson shifted Emma to one arm so he could pull Sarah close with the other. "And if they don't approve, then they'll learn to live with their disappointment." She rested her head against his shoulder. "I've already lost one love to fate. I won't lose another to fear or others' expectations." They stood together by the window, Emma babbling "Papa" between them, as the spring wind carried the scent of new growth through the house. Sarah thought of that first desperate night, of all that had grown from what seemed like tragedy. She thought of Catherine's oak, damaged but surviving, putting out new leaves despite its scars. "Write to your sister," Jackson said finally. "Tell her about the ranch, about our plans. Let her know her niece is loved and cared for. The rest will sort itself out." Sarah nodded against his chest, feeling the solid strength that had supported her through so much already. "I'll tell her about the garden too, about how we're honoring the past while building our future, about how love grows even in winter." Jackson added softly, kissing her forehead, "and blooms stronger for the storms it's weathered." Emma reached for the letter, crumpling it slightly in her small fist. They both laughed, the tension breaking. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their love as resilient as the Wyoming earth itself. Jackson found Sarah in Catherine's garden, Emma playing with soft cotton blocks on a quilt beside her while she worked the spring soil. He held the land deed in his hand, the document that had occupied his thoughts since Sarah's letter from Montana. Arrived, the tomato seedlings are coming up strong, Sarah called, not yet turning around. She'd learned to recognize his footsteps, the particular way he moved across their land. And the peas! She stopped as she finally faced him, noting his serious expression. What is it? He settled beside them on the quilt, smiling as Emma immediately crawled into his lap. Been doing some thinking about the future. Our future. Sarah sat back on her heels, brushing dirt from her hands. That sounds serious. It is. He handed her the document. Had my lawyer in town draw this up. Want you to read it carefully. Sarah unfolded the deed, her eyes widening as she understood what she was seeing. Jackson, this puts the ranch in all our names. You, me, and Emma, equal shares. He bounced Emma gently as she played with his watch chain. If anything happens to me, you won't have to depend on anyone's goodwill. The ranch will be yours, free and clear. But your family have their own lands, their own lives. He reached out to tuck a stray curl behind her ear. This place, what we're building here, it's ours, yours and mine and Emma's. Want to make that official, proper and legal? Sarah traced the elaborate script that spelled out their names. You've put Emma's name as Emma Cole, if that's agreeable to you. His voice was carefully neutral. Thought we might make that official too after the wedding. Give her my name along with my land. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. She's already chosen you. Calls you Papa every chance she gets now. Being a father. Jackson swallowed hard. Never thought I'd have the chance after Catherine, but that night in the storm, when I found you both, sometimes the good Lord has plans we can't begin to imagine. Sarah set the deed aside carefully and moved closer, fitting herself against his side while Emma crawled between them. I've been thinking too, about what to tell Margaret when we visit. Oh? His arm came around her shoulders, solid and secure. About how a man's worth isn't measured by his profession or his place in society. It's measured by the love in his heart and the strength of his character. She kissed Emma's curls, then Jackson's cheek. About how sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as tragedy, and the truest path forward isn't always the one we planned. You've got a way with words, Mrs. Mitchell. He turned to capture her lips properly. Soon to be Mrs. Cole. Emma patted their faces, demanding attention, and they both laughed. Jackson scooped her up, rising to his feet and pulling Sarah with him. Come on, both of you, want to show you something. He led them to the barn, where he'd been spending extra time lately after the day's work was done. In a corner near his workbench stood a beautiful cradle, crafted from the fallen oak limb. Thought Emma might be getting too big for that drawer. She's been sleeping in, he said softly. And maybe someday it could be used again, for a brother or sister. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. The cradle was exquisite, every detail lovingly carved. Along its sides, delicate wildflowers bloomed in the wood, the same flowers that grew in Catherine's garden, and on the headboard, 2 hearts, intertwined, surrounded by protective leaves. The old oak, she whispered. You made something new. From what was broken. Like us, he agreed. Seemed fitting. He set Emma down in the cradle, and she immediately snuggled into the soft blankets he'd already placed there. The ranch hands helped me move Catherine's old hope chest up to the attic last week. Made room in our bedroom for this. Our bedroom, Sarah repeated softly. The words still gave her a thrill. Our home, our life, our future, Jackson added, drawing her close. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. Sound like a plan you can live with? Sarah looked at their daughter, already falling asleep in her new cradle, then up at the man who had become so much more than a rescuer. Sounds like the best plan I've ever heard. The setting sun through the barn window caught the silver edges of the land deed, still in Sarah's hand. 3 names, 1 future, written not just on paper, but on their hearts. Outside, spring winds carried the promise of growth, of love blooming ever stronger in fertile soil. Margaret's second letter arrived as they were preparing for their summer trip to Montana. The envelope was thick, weighted with familial expectations and what Sarah recognized as her sister's particular brand of well-meaning interference. She sat at the kitchen table, Emma playing contentedly with the silver spoon Jackson had given, her for teething while she read the carefully penned words. "Dr. Harrison asked about you specifically," Margaret wrote. "He's quite eager to meet both you and precious Emma. His practice is thriving, and he has such a lovely home near the church. I've taken the liberty of inviting him to dinner when you visit. A woman in your position must think practically about her future." Sarah set the letter down, her throat tight. Through the window she could see Jackson working with the spring. Colts, his movements sure and patient as he guided a young horse through its paces. Even at this distance, she could see his lips moving, knowing he was speaking gentle encouragements to the nervous animal. "Your papa has a way with scared things," she told Emma softly. "Knows just how to calm their fears and help them find their strength." Emma babbled in response, dropping her spoon to reach toward the window where Jackson was visible. The letter seemed to burn against her fingers as she picked it up again. Margaret meant well. They all did. Their concern was natural. Their desire to see her settled with someone of Thomas's standing understandable. But they hadn't seen Jackson hold Emma through her fever night, hadn't watched him teach Sarah the skills she'd need to be truly independent, hadn't witnessed the tender way he balanced honoring Catherine's memory while building a new future. "Mama," Emma said clearly, patting Sarah's hand. "Papa?" Her eyes went to the window again. "Yes, sweetheart. That's your papa out there." The words filled her with warmth and certainty. "Let's go see him, shall we?" Sarah scooped up Emma and headed outside, leaving Margaret's letter behind. The spring air was sweet with new grass and distant wildflowers. Jackson looked up as they approached, his face softening the way it always did when he saw them. "Taking a break from your correspondence?" he asked, leading the young colt to the fence. "Taking a break from other people's expectations?" Sarah shifted Emma so she could see the horse. "Margaret's arranged a dinner with an eligible doctor when we visit." Jackson's hands stilled on the colt's rope. "Ah, she means well." "Course she does." He stroked the colt's nose. "Can't fault her for wanting what's best for you both." "I already have what's best for us." Sarah reached over to cover his hand with hers. "I'm not going to those dinners. Jackson, I'm not going to pretend to consider other options when my heart is already home." He turned his hand to grasp hers, work-roughened fingers intertwining. "Sarah, no, let me finish." She took a deep breath. "I love Thomas. He was a good man, a skilled doctor, everything my family thought I should want. But loving him didn't make me strong, didn't teach me who I could be beyond someone's wife. Here with you, I'm learning to be more than I ever imagined." Emma reached for Jackson, and he took her smoothly, settling her on his hip. "And what will you tell your sister?" "The truth, that I found a man who sees me as a partner, not a possession. Who's teaching his daughter, yes, his daughter, that a woman can be both gentle and strong." She touched his cheek. "A man who took in two strangers and gave them not just shelter, but a future." Jackson kissed her palm, then Emma's forehead. "Not strangers," he corrected softly. "Family. From that first night somehow, we were already family." The young colt nudged Jackson's shoulder, seeking attention. Emma giggled and reached to pat its soft nose, fearless as always. Looking at them, this man, this child, this life they were building, Sarah knew her choice wasn't really a choice at all. It was simply recognizing what her heart had known since that stormy night. She was already home. The handmade quilt took shape under Sarah's fingers, each carefully stitched piece telling part of their story. She'd started it the day after leaving Margaret's letter unanswered, choosing instead to channel her energy into creating something meaningful. The center square featured a rich blue fabric from one of Emma's outgrown dresses. Around it, she'd arranged pieces from Jackson's old shirts, worn soft with honest work. That's coming along beautifully, Jackson said, entering their bedroom. After settling Emma for her nap, he traced one particular square of faded red cloth. I remember this shirt. Was wearing it the night I found you both. I know. Sarah smiled up at him. That's why it's next to Emma's dress. Everything connects, tells our story. He sat beside her on their bed, careful not to disturb her work. Speaking of stories, had word from the Hands. Miller's wife is expecting their first child come winter. Nancy must be overjoyed. They've wanted a baby for so long. Sarah set aside her needle. We should invite them for Sunday dinner. I could share some of Emma's things they might need. Jackson's eyes crinkled with warmth. Already thinking like a rancher's wife, taking care of our people. Our people, Sarah repeated softly. I like the sound of that. They had been gradually expanding the ranch's operations, with Sarah taking on more responsibilities as her confidence grew. The Hands had accepted her authority naturally, respecting both her growing knowledge and the way she balanced firmness with fairness. Thinking we might build on that southeast pasture, Jackson said, his tone casual, but his eyes intent. Good grazing land there, room for expansion. Could put up a proper house too for Miller and Nancy. Keep them close. Sarah understood what he wasn't saying directly. A ranch was only as strong as its community, and they were building more than just a business. They were creating a home for others as well. The garden's producing more than we can use, she mused. With another family here, nothing would go to waste. And Nancy could help with the preserving come harvest time. Jackson pulled her close, mindful of the quilt in her lap. You've come a long way from that city doctor's wife who didn't know a bridle from a saddle. Had a good teacher, she nestled against him. Though I seem to recall someone saying I took to ranch life like a duck to water. That you did. His fingers found a loose strand of her hair, twirling it thoughtfully. Catherine always said this land had a way of calling to the right people. Guess she knew what she was talking about. The ease with which they now spoke of their lost loves was itself a sign of healing. Their memories were honored, woven into the fabric of their new life like the squares in Sarah's quilt. Found something in town yesterday, Jackson said, reaching into his pocket. Made me think of you. He withdrew a small paper packet. For the garden. Sarah opened it to find seeds, lupine and columbine, hardy flowers that would flourish in the Wyoming soil. Blue and purple, she noted, like the first crocus. Thought they might look nice along the new fence. Give Miller and Nancy something pretty to look at from their windows once we get their house built. The simple gesture touched Sarah deeply. Here was a man who thought of beauty as well as practicality, who understood the importance of making a home and not just a living. We should start planning that house soon, she said, before Nancy gets too far along, and we'll need to expand the chicken coop, maybe add another milk cow. Already working out the details? Jackson smiled. Well, you did marry a doctor's daughter. We're good at planning ahead. She leaned up to kiss him softly. And I learned from Catherine's journal how important it is to think through every aspect of ranch expansion. Their quiet moment was interrupted by Emma's voice from the nursery, awake from her nap and calling for Papa, as she usually did. They shared a knowing look before Jackson rose to fetch their daughter. Sarah returned to her quilting, adding another square, this one from the shirt Jackson had worn at their small wedding ceremony. Every stitch strengthened the bonds between them, between past and present, between the life they'd known and the one they were building together. Emma's first pair of real boots sat in the center of the kitchen table, tiny and perfect. Jackson had them specially made in town, an early birthday present for their daughter, who was growing stronger and more adventurous by the day. Sarah ran her finger along the delicate stitching, marveling at how something so small could carry such weight of meaning. They're just like yours, she said to Jackson, who was watching their daughter toddle around the kitchen, still in her soft indoor shoes. Every ranch girl needs proper boots, he replied, catching Emma as she stumbled toward him. What do you think, little one? Ready to be a real cowgirl. Emma reached eagerly for the boots, her face lighting up at the sight of them. Boots! Papa! Boots! The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the fresh paint on the newly installed cabinets. The kitchen had been slowly transforming under their combined vision. Sarah's practical knowledge of what a busy household needed melded with Jackson's skilled craftsmanship. "Letter came from Margaret," Sarah said, watching Jackson help Emma try on her new boots. "She's accepting our invitation. She and Robert will come for the Harvest Festival." Jackson looked up, surprise and pleasure mixing in his expression. "Changed her mind about us being too remote for a proper visit, did she?" "Apparently, Nancy Miller's glowing letters about ranch life have made an impression." Sarah smiled, remembering her sister's grudging admission that perhaps Wyoming wasn't quite the wasteland she'd imagined. "And I think she's curious about the man who could make her headstrong sister so content with country living. Reckon we'll have to show her our best then." Jackson stood, lifting Emma to test her balance in the new boots. "Though I'm not changing who we are to impress city folks." "No need," Sarah assured him, moving to straighten Emma's dress. "I want her to see us exactly as we are. This ranch, our life, our family, it's all the proof she needs that I made." "The right choice." The boots made tiny scuffing sounds on the floor as Emma took her first tentative steps in them. Her face screwed up in concentration, small hands gripping her parents' fingers on either side. "Look at you, sweet girl," Sarah encouraged, "standing tall just like Papa." Jackson's eyes were suspiciously bright as he watched their daughter master her new footwear. "Next thing you know, she'll be helping with the roundup." "Not for a few years yet," Sarah laughed, then sobered slightly. "Though we should talk about that school teacher you mentioned. The one interested in coming out from Boston. Mrs. Harrison? She's still keen on the idea, thinks teaching ranch children would be an adventure." Jackson kept his eyes on Emma, but Sarah could hear the question in his voice. "Be good to have. Proper schooling available, especially with Miller's little one on the way. And others, perhaps?" Sarah's hand drifted to her stomach, still flat, but holding their newest secret. Jackson's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "Sarah, are you—" She nodded, joy bubbling up inside her. "Dr. Wallace confirmed it yesterday. Early spring, he thinks." In 2 strides, Jackson had gathered her close with his free arm, Emma still, holding his other hand. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby." "Another Cole to help run the ranch," Sarah said softly. "Emma's going to be a big sister." Emma, sensing the emotional moment, patted both their legs with her free. "And Mama happy, Papa happy." "Very happy, sweetheart." Jackson knelt to her level. "You know how you help Papa with the horses and Mama with the garden?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Well, soon you'll have an even more important job. You're going to help us take care of a new baby." "Baby?" Emma's eyes grew round. "Like Nancy baby?" "That's right." Sarah joined them on the floor, heedless of her skirts. "But this baby will be here with us, your little brother or sister." The morning stretched before them, full of chores and responsibilities. But for a moment they simply sat together on the kitchen floor, Emma proudly clomping around in her new boots while her parents watched, their hands intertwined and resting gently over the promise of new life. Through the window, Sarah could see Nancy Miller hanging washing in her yard, her own gentle roundness visible now. The ranch was growing, not just in acres and cattle, but in souls and connections. Each new life, each new arrival, strengthened the bonds between them all. "We'll need another cradle," Jackson mused, his thumb stroking Sarah's knuckles. "Though, I reckon that oak has a few more treasures to share with us yet." "Like us," Sarah said softly, "growing stronger with each season, putting down deeper roots." Emma clomped back to them, boots clunking on the floor. "Family," she declared with a toddler's perfect certainty, and they gathered her close, their laughter echoing in the sunlit kitchen. The new family portrait hung above the fireplace, a gift from a traveling photographer who'd stayed at the ranch while passing through. In it, Jackson stood tall and proud, one hand resting on Sarah's shoulder as she sat with Emma in her lap. The subtle curve of Sarah's growing belly was just visible, a promise of future joy captured in silver nitrate and paper. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Jackson said, adding another log to the fire. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the first hint of winter's return. Feels like yesterday and forever all at once. Sarah looked up from her mending, Emma sleeping peacefully in her new trundle bed nearby. I was thinking the same thing. Remember how scared I was that night? So certain we wouldn't survive until morning. Remember how tiny Emma was? Jackson settled beside her on the settee. Now look at her, running everywhere, helping with the chickens, chattering about everything she sees. They both watched their daughter sleep, her dark curls splayed across the pillow. She'd spent the day helping Jackson repair fence posts, her little boots leaving tracks alongside his bigger ones in the mud, her toy hammer banging importantly on wood scraps while he worked. Nancy asked me today if I ever regret not continuing to Montana, Sarah said, setting aside her sewing. If I ever wonder about that Dr. Margaret wanted me to meet. Jackson's hand found hers, warm and steady. And do you? I told her some. People spend their whole lives searching for what that storm brought me to. She leaned against his shoulder. That every morning I wake up exactly where I'm meant to be. He kissed her temple softly. Even with all the hard work, the early mornings, the endless chores, the worry over crops and cattle, especially with all that. Sarah turned to face him. Because I'm not just existing here, Jackson. I'm living, really living. Everything I do has purpose, has meaning. And I'm doing it with you, with our family. A particularly strong gust rattled the windows, and Emma stirred in her sleep. They both held their breath, but she simply turned over, clutching her rag doll, another of Jackson's careful creations, closer. Storms coming, Jackson noted. Not like last year's, but still significant. Sarah nodded, remembering. Should we check the barn? Make sure everything's secured? Jackson smiled at her instinctive response, so different from the city woman she'd been a year ago. Already done. Though I wouldn't mind walking out there with you for old time's sake. They bundled up against the wind, Jackson insisting on wrapping an extra scarf around Sarah, despite her protests that she wasn't made of glass, just because she was expecting. The barn was warm and familiar, smelling of hay and horses. Old Belle nickered a greeting, and Sarah couldn't help but pat the mare who taught her to ride. Look here, Jackson said softly, leading her to his workbench. A small object sat covered with a cloth. Been working on this for today. Anniversary gift of sorts. Sarah pulled back the cloth to reveal a delicate wooden box. On its lid, Jackson had carved their story. A broken-down carriage in a storm. A rider emerging from the snow. A ranch house with smoke curling from its chimney. Around the edges, he'd carved spring flowers and new leaves, symbols of their fresh beginning. Oh, Jackson, she breathed, opening the box. Inside, nestled in soft cloth, lay the pearl-handled compass that had been in her pocket that fateful night. She'd thought it lost in all the confusion. Found it in the old carriage, when we salvaged what we could, he explained. Kept it safe, waiting for the right moment. Thought we could give it to Emma someday. Tell her how it helped guide her mama to her true home. Sarah traced the intricate carvings on the box, feeling the love worked into every detail. It's perfect. Everything about it is perfect. She looked up at him through tears. I love you. Jackson Cole. More with each passing day. He gathered her close, one hand resting protectively over their unborn child. And I love you, Sarah Cole. You and Emma and this little one on the way. You're everything I never dared hope for. After Catherine. The wind sang around the barn's eaves, so like and yet unlike that night a year ago. Then it had been a sound of danger and fear. Now it was merely nature's melody, accompanying the quiet symphony of their life together. We should get back, Jackson said eventually. Check on Emma. Sarah nodded, clutching the precious box. Yes, let's go home. They walked back through the swirling wind, but this time there was no fear, no uncertainty. Just the solid warmth of shared love, shared purpose, shared destiny. The storm that had once threatened their lives had become the catalyst for their greatest blessing, each other. The packet of seeds lay open on the kitchen table, their promise of future harvests bringing a smile to Sarah's face. Jackson had ordered them specially from back east. Vegetables for the expanded garden, grains for the new south field, and flowers that would bloom around the schoolhouse they were planning to build. "Mrs. Harrison's letter came today," Sarah called to Jackson, who was helping Emma cook with her toy pots and pans. "She'll be here by spring thaw. Says she's looking forward to teaching our ranch children their letters and numbers." "Good timing," Jackson replied, accepting a wooden spoon from Emma with exaggerated gratitude. "Nancy's little one will be walking by then, and this one," he touched Sarah's now prominent belly, "will be keeping us plenty busy." Emma patted Sarah's stomach gently as she'd been taught. "Baby brother," she announced confidently. "Might be a sister," Sarah reminded her, smoothing her daughter's wild curls. "Either way, you'll be the best big sister any baby could want." Jackson gathered the toy cookware, deftly redirecting Emma's attention. "Speaking of siblings, had word from my sister Mary. She's thinking of moving out here with the children, now that she's on her own. Says she misses ranch life." Sarah's heart warmed at the prospect. The miller's old cabin could be fixed up nicely for them. And with the school starting, she paused, seeing Jackson's knowing smile. "I'm getting ahead of myself again, aren't I?" "Planning and dreaming's what built this ranch," he said, lifting Emma onto his hip. "And what keeps building it? Mary's got a good head for numbers, could help with the books while you focus on the garden and preserving." Through the window, Sarah could see Nancy hanging washing, her baby son sleeping in a basket nearby. The young woman had blossomed in a role as a ranch wife, bringing fresh energy and ideas to their growing community. Other families had begun settling nearby, drawn by the promise of good work and fair treatment at the coal ranch. "Thinking we should start on that new barn before winter sets in proper," Jackson mused, watching Emma arrange her toys in careful rows. "With Mary's boys coming, we'll need the extra hands, and that means more space for horses, tools, and a proper tack room," Sarah added, remembering his long-held dream, "with a workshop for your carving." Jackson's talent with wood had become known in the territory. Orders for his pieces, from cradles to hope chests, came regularly now, providing extra income during lean times and a creative outlet during long winter evenings. "Been sketching some ideas," he admitted. "Thought we might add a room above. Make it a proper workshop and schoolroom until the schoolhouse is built. Give Mrs. Harrison a place to start come spring." Sarah rose carefully, one hand supporting her back, and moved to embrace her family. "Look at us, planning and building. Who would have thought?" "That night in the storm, I knew," Jackson said, softly, his free arm pulling her close. "The moment I saw you holding Emma, fighting so hard to keep her warm, I knew you were meant to be here, both of you." Emma wiggled down from Jackson's arms and returned to her toys, humming a tune she'd learned from Nancy. The simple domestic moment struck Sarah with its rightness. Her daughter playing safely, her husband's strong presence beside her, their unborn child moving beneath her heart, and all around them the life they'd built together. "Mary's boys will love it here," she said confidently. "Room to run, honest work to do, family all around." "Them. Ranch raised my sister and me right enough," Jackson agreed, "teaching us the value of hard work, the importance of community, the truth about what really matters in life." Sarah gathered the seed packets, already planning their placement in the expanded garden. Each variety had its purpose: food for their table, feed for their animals, beauty for their souls. Like the seeds they'd plant in spring, their dreams for the ranch's future were taking root, promising abundant harvests in years to come. "Papa, look!" Emma held up a careful arrangement of her toys. "All ready." "Ready for what, sweet girl?" Jackson knelt beside her creation. "For family," she declared, her small face serious. "All of them." Sarah and Jackson exchanged glances over their daughter's head, understanding in their shared look. Emma had captured it perfectly. Everything they did, every expansion and improvement, was about family, not just their own growing brood, but the extended family of ranch hands, neighbors, and newcomers who would share in their vision of building something lasting in this wild, beautiful land. The family Bible lay open on the table, its pages ready to record their formal union. Sarah ran her fingers over the space where their names would soon be written, thinking of the other marriages, births, and significant dates already recorded. There in careful script, Catherine's marriage to Jackson, written in her own elegant hand. Now Sarah would add their names, binding their love not just in law and faith, but in the very history of the ranch itself. "Nervous?" Nancy asked, adjusting Emma's flower crown. The little girl stood patiently, unusually still in her new dress. "Peaceful," Sarah corrected, smoothing her own simple white dress over her growing belly. Like everything's finally settling into place. Through the window, she could see the ranch hands and neighbors gathering in Catherine's garden, now flourishing under Sarah's care. They'd chosen this spot deliberately, surrounded by the flowers that represented their past and future growing. Together, Jackson's sister Mary had arrived the week before with her 3 boys, bringing welcome chaos and helping hands to the preparations. Now she entered the kitchen, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers the children had gathered. "You look beautiful," Mary said, her eyes misty. "And that little one," she nodded at Sarah's belly, "is determined to be part of the celebration." Indeed, the baby had been active all morning, as if sensing the importance of the day. Sarah pressed a hand to her side, feeling the strong movements. "Your nephew or niece has perfect timing." "Speaking of timing," Nancy smiled, "I believe everyone's ready. And Jackson's about to wear a path in the grass with his pacing." Emma tugged at Sarah's skirt. "Mama pretty, Papa waiting." "Yes, he is, sweet girl." Sarah knelt carefully to her, daughter's level. "Ready to help Mama and Papa get married." Emma nodded solemnly, clutching her small basket of flower petals. They'd practiced her role the day before, Jackson following behind her as she scattered petals, both of them laughing. With delight at the simple task, the women helped Sarah with her final preparations. Then Mary and Nancy slipped out to join the gathering. Through the open window came the sounds of conversation and laughter. The community they'd built, coming together to celebrate their love. Sarah picked up the Bible, holding it close for a moment. Then, with Emma's small hand in hers, she stepped out into the sunlit garden. Jackson stood waiting by the rose arbor he'd built for this day, looking handsome in his best suit. But it was his expression that caught Sarah's heart, the pure joy and love shining in his eyes as he watched them approach. Emma performed her duty perfectly, scattering petals along the path before running to Jackson's waiting arms. He scooped her up, and together they watched Sarah walk the final steps to join them. The minister's words were traditional, but Sarah and Jackson had added their own touches to the ceremony. They spoke of building on foundations of the past, of honoring memories while embracing new joy. When Jackson produced the rings, simple gold bands he'd had engraved with their initials and the date, Sarah noticed he'd had them nested in a small wooden box carved with intertwined hearts. "I take you, Sarah Mitchell, to be my wife." Jackson's voice was clear and strong. "To build our future together, to raise our children in love, to face all seasons side by side." "I take you, Jackson Cole, to be my husband," Sarah responded, her voice steady despite her tears. "To share in all labors, to nurture our family, to grow older together in this home we've made." Emma stood between them, holding their free hands as they spoke their vows. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson gathered them both close, their unborn child protected between them. The celebration that followed was everything a ranch wedding should be: abundant food, joyful music, children playing among the flowers, while adults shared stories and laughter. Mary's boys had appointed themselves official protectors of the wedding cake, while Nancy's baby slept peacefully in a cradle nearby. As evening approached, Jackson led Sarah to a quiet corner of the garden. "Happy, Mrs. Cole?" "Completely, Mr. Cole." She leaned against him, watching Emma dance with her new cousins. "Though I've felt married to you in my heart for months now." "I know what you mean." He touched her wedding ring gently. But there's something right about declaring it proper, sharing our joy with everyone who's part of our life here. Sarah opened the family Bible, which had rested on a special table throughout the celebration. Together, they wrote their names and the date, their future now officially part of the ranch's ongoing story. The new compass gleamed in Sarah's hands, a birthday gift from Jackson that matched the old pearl-handled one, now safely stored in Emma's carved box. Outside, another winter storm approached, but this time there was no fear in Sarah's heart, only gratitude for how far they'd come. "Storm's coming in fast," Jackson said, entering their bedroom with Emma on his heels. "Reminded me of another night, not so long ago. Except now we're ready for it," Sarah smiled, setting the compass aside to accept Emma's eager hug. "Barns secured, animals fed, pantry stocked, and family all safe and warm," Jackson added, settling beside them. His hand found its familiar place on Sarah's rounded belly, though this little one seems to be taking their time arriving. Emma patted her mother's stomach. "Baby waiting for snow like me." Sarah and Jackson exchanged surprised looks. They'd never told Emma the full story of that night, yet somehow their perceptive daughter had sensed the connection. "That's right, sweet girl," Jackson said softly. "You came to us in the snow, brought all our happiness with you." The wind picked up, whistling around the eaves, but inside their home all was peaceful. The house smelled of fresh bread and pine boughs, and a fire crackled cheerfully in the hearth. Through the window, Sarah could see lights in the miller's house and in Mary's cabin, their extended family close and secure. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, watching Emma arrange her toys in front of the fire, "about what I'll write in the family Bible when this little one arrives, about how to tell them the story of our family." Jackson drew her closer. "And what will you say? That love finds us in unexpected moments. That sometimes what looks like disaster is really destiny in disguise." She turned to meet his eyes. "That families aren't just born. They're built, day by day, choice by choice." "Built strong," Jackson agreed, "like this ranch, like Catherine's oak, sprouting new branches after the storm." Emma brought them her favorite storybook, climbing into Jackson's lap. As he began to read, his deep voice mixing with the storm's song, Sarah felt the baby move within her. Another cold child, born of love old and new, soon to join their expanding family. The compass caught the firelight, throwing golden reflections on the wall. Sarah smiled, remembering that desperate night when its predecessor had led her here, not just to safety, but to love, to purpose, to home. "We've come full circle," she whispered. Jackson paused in his reading. "No, my love, we've built something better than a circle. We've built a future." Outside, the snow began to fall, each flake a promise of renewal, of life continuing, of love growing ever stronger with each passing season.